Hello, welcome everyone. We will give it a few seconds as our attendees join, and then we will begin our panel discussion. Okay, a very good afternoon to everyone with us today. My name is Rania Saadewi, and I am the Executive Director at the Pearl Initiative. And it is really my pleasure to welcome you all to our webinar, which is part of the Pearl Initiative's Anti-Corruption Best Practices Program. Today's panel discussion features leading Saudi corporate figures who will discuss how to effectively build an ethical culture in the workplace. Before we start, I'd like to start by introducing the Pearl Initiative for those audience members that are not familiar with the organization. The Pearl Initiative is the Gulf region's leading independent nonprofit organization by business for business, working to improve corporate accountability and transparency across the private sector, including corporations, family firms, SMEs, and philanthropic organizations across the Gulf region. We were established 10 years ago by regional business leaders, as well as the United Nations Office for Partnerships. More recently, we are one of the few organizations in the Gulf region to receive special consultative status from the United Nations Economic and Social Council. The Pearl Initiative runs programs focusing on governance-related matters, conducting regionally based research, convening business leaders, government, and civil society leaders, as well as students, to discuss challenges and opportunities in implementing best practices across the workforce. We also run workshops and trainings to support business professionals as they take the lead in implementing corporate governance, accountability, and transparency practices in their organizations. It has grown increasingly imperative to build an ethical corporate culture in the workplace. Data has shown that integrity is a key component in building a robust culture and is also a strong indication of a firm's potential market value. Indeed, having a strong organizational ethical environment improves a number of aspects of the corporation, including employee morale, organizational commitment, and involvement and retention of the workforce. Since 2015, the Pearl Initiative's Anti-Corruption Best Practices Program has trained and convened nearly 600 business professionals across Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Oman, Bahrain, and the UAE, providing training, convenings, and creating this culture to raise the level of integrity practices within companies. It's my honor in today's session, we are happy to collaborate with some of our leading corporate partners in Saudi Arabia who will discuss their best practices in compliance and how Gulf businesses can leverage integrity processes to entrench sustainable corporate culture. With a strong Saudi lens, this webinar will address the following areas: the relationship between a company's culture and its integrity outcomes, key challenges and opportunities in embedding ethical practices across all departments and functions of the company, and different ways of sustaining ethical codes, particularly during uncertain times like we are all facing with the COVID-19 pandemic. But we also want to hear from you, the audience. So we encourage you to use the Q&A function below, share your questions throughout for the panelists throughout the session. In addition, we will be doing some active polling and encourage you to respond so that we can be sure that we're addressing your questions. And with that, allow me to introduce our expert moderators and speakers who have given us their time today to share their experience. I'd like to first introduce Mr. Naveed Ansari. Mr. Naveed is the Senior Vice President for Compliance in the Middle East for Siemens. Naveed is our moderator for today and has served in different countries as a compliance head before taking over the responsibility of the Middle East region. He is also part of the Siemens Global Compliance Remediation Project. Thank you, Naveed, for joining us today. Our expert panelists today include Mr. Jalil Ghani, who is the General Manager for Corporate Ethics and Compliance at STC, Saudi Telecom Company, the Saudi-based leading telecom and technology services provider. Under Jalil's leadership, in 2020, STC developed a new ethics and compliance program focused on elevating the culture of integrity within the company. As part of the program, STC's Code of Ethics and Business Conduct, Integrity Takes Us Forward, was also launched. More recently, Jalil was also the deputy chair of the B20 Saudi Arabia Integrity and Compliance Task Force. We're also honored to be joined by Mr. Becker Sindi. Mr. Becker is the Compliance Senior Manager for the Middle East region for SABIC, the Saudi Basics Industries Corporation, a multinational chemical manufacturing company based in Riyadh. Mr. Becker looks after building and maintaining ethics and integrity cultures and programs, and carries over 14 years of experience from procurement to mega project management and global supply chain. He also comes with extensive experience across audits, governance programs, risk assessment, and compliance culture review. Finally, but certainly not least, Mr. Fibo Sarelis is joining us as the manager in the legal department at Sedco Holding, a leading Saudi institution providing investment and construction services across its portfolio. Mr. Fibos has over 10 years of experience, having worked in the private sector and in-house roles across the UK, Greece, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. His areas of legal expertise and practice include high net worth individual wealth management, family company governance, international regulatory compliance, private equity, real estate assets, Sharia financing, and commercial projects. And with this, I want to thank you all again, and we're excited to kick off the conversation. So over to you, Mr. Naveed.
Yeah, thank you, Rania, and it's been a pleasure and privilege to be here. I always cherish working with Pearl Initiatives. We have a partnership with Pearl Initiative with respect to Siemens Integrity Initiative, and other partners have been SABIC and all the other key players of Saudi Arabia. So it's always a pleasure to be part of this panel, learned panel. It gives opportunity to deliberate on this most critical yet very informative and interesting topic of how to have a corporate integrity culture, effective one. And I'm really happy to have a very learned panel with me, very experienced people from different sides of the businesses. B2B is there, STC, B2C, SABIC, B2C is STC, B2B is SABIC, and then we have a company which is a mix of B2B and B2C, both, that is the Sedco, and they are basically the family-owned business. So before entering into these discussions, just a few words that what basically we see as a culture in general terms and the corporate culture. As we all know, these are a set of values, practices, principles, a group of people or stakeholders put together in an organization, in a country, that formulates how the values have been upheld, how the day-to-day operation works, what are the do's and don'ts. And in that sense, we have seen the corporate culture, like any other culture, evolved over the period of time. It has evolved from a time when antitrust, competition, fair dealings were not part of the corporate cultures, or even gratifications, bribery, anti-corruption, they were not considered as part of the corporate culture. Nowadays, these are very sensitive topics to the extent of human rights and environmental compliance. Corporate entities are no longer being seen as profit-making machines. They have been seen as corporate citizens, corporate responsible citizens, and that's why we have now indexes, evaluations of corporate social responsibility. It is really great to have the panel with people who have been championing this in Saudi Arabia. There are quite milestones of quantum leap that Saudi Arabia has taken over the period of 10 years I have spent in Saudi Arabia. And that's what we will be looking into in a bit of depth. And with that, we will look into how things have been moved in Saudi Arabia. So I would put the first question to my learned colleague Jalil, that in his experience and time that he has spent in Saudi Arabia, what is the observation he has of the evolution of compliance or evolving of compliance, especially the corporate culture, looking into his experience of SABIC and STC both. So Jalil.
Hi, David. So thank you very much for the question. And I think it's an interesting question because in the time frame I have been in the kingdom, I recall when I first came here, having my first training session on compliance, the question was always asked to me is, well, why are you telling us about compliance? Why are you telling us about ethics? We are all ethical people. And really the discussion has evolved from that to where we are today, where people really understand the meaning and what we're doing and why we're doing it. Because one of the challenges I always try to explain to people is you need to explain the why you're doing what you are doing. People understand compliance, and I think especially in the region, we all understand what compliance means, but that tends to focus on process and procedural compliance. Everyone understands that they need to follow a policy and process. And then the question always comes in terms of, well, what does that mean from an ethical standpoint? And what does that mean from a cultural standpoint? Because rules are there, people follow the rules, but really, how do you get to the decision point? And I have seen that evolution over time. The 2030 vision helped accelerate that cause, especially with the focus that it has on anti-corruption. And people now understand that corruption is just more than just taking bribes. There are other elements to corruption as well. And people really now understand the importance of really what that means for an organization. So you now are seeing this change and this transition from this procedural compliance of following the rules to really to doing the right thing. And as organizations like STC, as SABIC, as Aramco, these large organizations have a huge focus on this area. You've seen that move into the supply chains within the country as well. So a lot more of the organizations are trying to understand really what this means for them and how can they transition their organizations to make sure they're doing the right thing. So it really is having an impact on the whole ecosystem within the kingdom.
Thank you, Jalil, for that. And I'll come back to you on this also because you have a very special experience of B20 recently. We would like to hear from you on that because that is one of the factors that we like to see, that how the external factor impacts the organizations in the country, motivates them for the compliance. But I'll move to the other panelists. To Fevers, how do you see, because you are coming from a company, or you're already being in a company which is predominantly family owned, yet they have a compliance program which is not very common being considered. So how have you seen this compliance evolved in your organization and overall in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the time you have spent up till now in this part of the world?
Thank you, Naveed. So I guess with SEDCO, one of the unique circumstances is that from quite early on, probably in the late 90s, it really started to move away from being a family office, just simply operated by family members. And they had a compliance and corporate governance quite early on. They were one of the first family companies to, I guess, remove family members from executive posts and put independent members, incorporate audit and risk committees with independent members. And I think that has just continued to evolve with the changes of the laws. As Jalil said, the 2030 vision had a huge impact. It created a lot of changes in a variety of regulatory infrastructure. So the companies law, the employment law, franchise law, SAJA laws all changed and updated. And with this sort of regulatory change, I guess internally as a company, we followed suit. We worked on a very comprehensive corporate governance manual to try to capture all the values and visions that we want as a company, not as a family office. We took the approach of moving away from just being a family office, but being, a true corporation, in place with proper governance and, a very robust shareholders agreement, to gauge or to control the shareholders' input in the company.
Yeah, that's good to know that, because the general concept usually people have that family owned is family owned, but it's clear that that is not the case. You guys have moved from a family owned to a very corporate structured entity much earlier, and that was the reason for you or for the organization to adopt to the compliance program. Again, I'll touch upon how you have managed that across the businesses that you have. You in Setco, you don't have one line of business. You have very varying line of business. So do you have a consistent one compliance program or culture of integrity? Tone is similar. How is it different?
Correct. Every subsidiary that we have also has from within the Setco holding team, it has a portfolio management committee. So this is one or two individuals, either from legal or corporate investment, that basically work from the values and missions of Setco Holding, and they try to incorporate those through participation in boards and other committees of the subsidiaries. So, for example, one of our main principles has always been investment, sustainable investment with Sharia compliance. This is something that even on the onset of sales and purchases for private equity, for example, this is something that we look for in those companies that we partner up with, or if we create a corporation, of course, it follows immediately the holding company's values and visions, and basically code of conduct. So we do have very much an influence, yes, from the beginning.
Good, great. No, here I would request the colleagues to put the poll number 2 to the participants, that we can get an input from the colleagues. So poll number 2 regarding, does your organization do work with the compliance functions? So would like to know from the participants how do they see it? Do they have compliance program? We'll get to know how many of the participants are coming from this. So kindly, whoever is there, just click the reply yes, no, or I'm not sure, and that will give us an overview that how many of you are familiar with the compliance program in your organization. Now, I moved to the very experienced Bakar in SABIC, and SABIC is a big, huge organization. As I've said, this B2B is with SABIC, and definitely the culture of compliance is such a big organization. Definitely, it has less exposure towards the daily customers like STCS, much be different. So Bakar, can you share with us how have you seen the SABIC evolution in compliance, and what are the things that you have seen improved over the period of time as the kingdom's focus, especially with Vision 2030, move towards transparency, towards having more integrity in the market?
Thank you, Naveed. When I see the journey in SABIC, we started with a long time ago, building a foundation and having policies, procedures, just to be in a solid ground, so we can move forward. After that, we focus to our external stakeholders. For example, like our suppliers, how we can do due diligence to our suppliers, how we can know our customers, and scan our customer, know which customer we need to do with doing also a risk assessment and risk management within our organizations. From here, we start then looking how we can evaluate ourselves with doing surveys, internal surveys. Then we saw the gaps. From here, we build these gaps. Now in SABIC, we have more than very huge our organization is in different locations, different cities, so we cannot do it all by ourselves as compliance department. So we have our integrity ambassadors around all our locations. These ambassadors, we give them the right training, the right material to spread our messages within their team or their colleagues. The other thing that we do, normal employees, they would like to see the top of the management or the top of the organization, they own the compliance, and they know if the company, they don't do an ethical business, all these programs, it will not work. We have also introduced something we call it, it's a compliance moment. Each employee manager, he need to have, for example, like 5 to 10 minutes discussion within his organization, at least one time every month, just to talk about compliance, give some scenarios, give any topics related to compliance. And with last year's survey, we noticed, leaders who we call them, upper standard leaders, leaders who they are, looking after, the champions and the ethics within the behavior in their organization. They are 3 more, their team, their result in the survey 3 more higher than bystander leaders, who they are just checking the box and they make sure they do they follow the regulation. Of course, all this should work together, to build, to enhance and build the culture.
Indeed, I couldn't agree more to that, and especially the thing that you mentioned, the small chats. In Siemens, we call this integrity dialogue, and we also have established that over the period of time, that how the tone from the middle gets established. So we have this integrity moments and integrity dialogue, and I fully am with you that this is more effective than sending a circulars and emphasizing on people to learn or read the codes. When their managers talk to them, the message gets in a very different way, and that's very effective in that sense. I'm coming back to you, Jalil, and that's with respect to that. As you all know, that this culture of integrity is entwined with a high, robust ethics and compliance program. But the absence of an ethics and compliance program, as we said, doesn't mean that there is no culture of integrity in that organization. So when you moved into STC, you saw that the culture was there, and you had to implement the compliance program, but at the same time, there was an external thing developing where you participated as the deputy chair to the B20. So how did you manage both of these tasks, and how much do you see the impact of this B20 done in Saudi Arabia cascading to the organizations in Saudi Arabia?
So I think to the first part of the question, I think, the challenge that you have in any organization is really setting the baseline, the standard for everyone to follow. Because like I always say, everyone has a different moral and ethical compass. Even though we're in the kingdom, everyone has a different set of ethical values. And those values, even though our personal values, may ultimately conflict with the corporate values. So you have to set a baseline so everyone understands what are the rules or the expectations from everyone within the organization. And we did that within STC by launching a code of ethics that is entitled Integrity Takes Us Forward. And really the idea being that sets of values for us as all employees, what are the rules and what are the expectations for us as a company. And for us, we started that off, and like you said, it was last year in the middle of the pandemic. So for us, to do a launch of a big program like that in the middle of a pandemic was a significant thing that we had to plan how we were going to do that. And we took a decision at the management level that the CEO wanted to start this with his leaders in the organization. So if you think during the midst of the pandemic, and this was the middle of 2020, where the CEO took a decision that we would get the top leaders of our organization together to sit down in a classroom session, and we were doing this in small groups, but to go through ethical leadership training for all of them to set that standard. That really set the expectation for all of the leaders in the organization in terms of what was to come and what the expectation was for all of them. And that was then further supported by other activities that we did, where the top 1,000 leaders in the companies then sat down with their teams and actually had interactive discussions with regards to the code. Again, just to socialize that to what you were talking about earlier with regards to the tone at the top and the tone in the middle. Now, with all of that going on within STC, at the same time, like you said, we had the B20 also going on at the same time. And STC were fortunate that of the task forces, 2 of the task forces were actually being led by STC executives. So our General Counsel, Mardud Alejmi, who was the chair of the task force, was leading that specifically for integrity and compliance. And the activity, the process itself is one where there are many task force members from across the globe, from B20 countries primarily, where we look at what was done in the past, what are the focus areas for us as a task force. And, we came out with 3 recommendations on what we feel, based on what was done in the past, were truly impactful or recommendations that we feel will have a lasting impact if implemented by the G20 countries. Now, some of those impact different organizations in different ways, but really what we are trying to focus on is really how can we move the needle to have something that is more sustainable for organizations and for the G20 countries. Because one of the challenges that you have is that you will go through this B20 and the G20 process and you come out with recommendations, but there's no follow through in terms of implementation and execution. We feel that the recommendations that we have developed are ones that are sustainable. There is going to be a process of following up with those, but really the idea is really how do we elevate the culture of compliance across the globe, across the G20 countries. But at the same time, I think what we have done is that we have put Saudi Arabia on the map in terms of what we feel from a G20 perspective and B20 perspective, what our priorities are. And that really further reinforces where we are with the 2030 vision as well, with regards to all the various pillars that have been laid out in terms of, we are serious about taking that forward and implementing all of those actions to really make sure that the 2030 vision is achievable as a country.
Thank you, Janil. And I cannot support more than what you have already said, that this B20 contribution to Saudi Arabia was one of the big things that has happened. And we also have a pool now for the colleagues to answer. We already got a pool answer for the previous one. So above 20% of our participants says that they have a compliance program, and 8% says no, and 8% say that they are not clear about whether they have it or not. So at least we have an audience which knows about a compliance program with ethical culture or corporate culture about. Let's see about the second poll. So one more aspect that touches on this B20 thing is that you rightly pointed out that that there was a concept of Saudi Arabia not being up to that level of corporate culture and corporate governance, and this B20 overall arrangement, the booklet that came out, the resolutions that have been passed, completely made this clear that the commitment the kingdom has and the focus that the kingdom has towards transparency and corporate culture is at beyond par. It is comparable to any other developed countries, and the commitment is quite strong. And with that, let's move into a very, I would say, micro level question to Fivos. So Fivos, in your organization, when you implemented compliance program and you have the compliance or corporate culture, do you have any benchmarking or a comparison with which you see that what you have implemented is up to par, or you need further improvement, or you have achieved? So do you compare your corporate culture or the compliance and ethical program with any benchmark?
So one of the things we do as a matter of practice is to look at regulated companies, like stock market companies, and we try to follow, I guess, their examples in terms of corporate governance, in terms of how the corporate actions that we take have a social and economic impact. So from regulated companies, you always get this very strongly regulated compliance necessity. They require to have independent board of directors, external audits on a yearly basis, and these are things we've incorporated into the operation of our company. So I guess that's sort of how we benchmark ourselves. I would assume in the beginning, it may have been more against international companies and international regulation, whereas now, as again, CMA regulations have really increased and developed. We have good examples in-house in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, so yeah, have you considered any type of certifications? There are some certifications. Or did your company consider getting any certification in that respect?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
Okay, no,
I
just
can tell you
as
our
nobody,
auditors-
we also didn't. I think nobody always pushes it, but just for the information of the participant panel, there are ISO certification and there are law firms which have been expert in doing this certification. They benchmark your compliance program and they provide you the opportunity to assess where do you stand and improve. Since we did this with Gibson and Dunn twice, so we get the opportunity to compare because they have a lot of database to see the practices. The driven legislations, in addition to what we have in the Middle East and Saudi Arabia, are usually coming from UK and US or German legislation. So you get a international view of how much your compliance program is benchmarked against these international regulations. So that do exist. Just wanted to touch upon that. Good. I think we can have the poll number 1 also. That will bring us the component. And we saw the pool. Everybody 100% agrees that the compliance is driven from the top. And that brings me back to you, Bakar, that a company like Sabic, which is much huge in the kingdom, it has a very big middle management also. So how do you see the role of the middle management in getting the corporate culture of integrity and ethics cascaded down? How do you see that? And as you already touched upon the compliance ambassador, but how this compliance ambassador function of Sabic embeds with the middle management? Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah. The compliance or the integrity ambassadors, they are our tools to spread the messages. But still, the leaders, when we say managers, not only the executives, even supervisors. He's managing a team or leading a team in affiliate or in one of the plants. So all leaders within the organization, they need to be very transparent with their employees, to show the commitment of the leadership, the messages they need to deliver, to show how our organization is committed to all ethical behavior, to all regulations that apply to us in all regions. It will encourage the individuals within the organization to be committed also. They will be more comfortable to approach their managers or the legal team or anyone within the organization if he have a query or something, he's have a doubt. It's not, as you mentioned in the beginning, compliance is not only a bribe. It's to be integrity is not only to take a bribe. There is a lot of regulations, some practices that maybe the individual is not aware of. It's for the organization to very huge fines or some issues within the government organization or any like, for example, when I study, I saw before, third of the frauds happen in the corporate and globally. It's due to a lack of internal control. So sometimes it's not only, it's like, the individual, how they know. You need to have, the foundation should be very clear, and these individual, you need to align them with them and make it clear for them so they know what they have to do and where they shouldn't.
And Naveed, can I build on that as well? Because I think, like you say, I think, when we talk about compliance, I think, everyone always says, it's about tone at the top. And I absolutely agree, it is tone at the top. But you always have to understand the biggest influencing factor on corporate culture is middle management. It's the tone in the middle. And that is, for any organization, is the most difficult layer to penetrate from a compliance perspective. Because if those people don't get it, don't understand it, then they are the people that the employees see on a day-to-day basis. Because what you have to understand, what I would say from a compliance perspective is, compliance is not about rules. Because when there are no rules, people go to default mode, and default tends to be their own personal ethics or the standards that have been set by their management and their leaders. They will try to emulate what their leaders actually do. And that's really is the influencing factor from an organizational standpoint, is how do you get those middle managers to buy into the compliance program, especially in organizations where those employees have been there maybe 10, 15, 20 years. They have been doing things in a certain way and they are very resistant to change. And then you have somebody coming in and say, well, irrelevant of what you have been doing for the 10, 15 years, you now need to do things in a different way. And a lot of compliance and integrity is about change management, is about how you do that effectively within the organization. And I think there's a comment in, in the panel, in the chat screen, and, it says about top people have to, it's walking the talk. There's an expression I always use that employees will listen with their eyes. It's they look at leaders' behavior. It's not what you say, it's what you do. And it's your behavior that counts. And if you look at 2020 as a year, was a very tough year for the world, right? It's unprecedented in terms of the pandemic. And if you look at it from an organizational standpoint, if those organizations have set KPIs for their salespeople and they have not reviewed those KPIs during that tough period, then that's an organizational issue, because those employees will do whatever they can to meet those KPIs. And even if that means doing things that are unethical, then companies should not be surprised of why those employees have behaved in that certain way, because you have set unrealistic expectations. So part of this process is making sure management and middle management truly understand the need for change, but also the need to be realistic with employees in terms of setting targets, setting KPIs that are realistic, and also understanding how they play a role in terms of not just communicating, but also in their behavior, because that's really is going to be the critical part in terms of changing the overall culture.
Very insightful and very true, Jalil, and I couldn't agree more that the culture is to be lived. It's not to be instilled without being practiced. The leaders at top, middle should not just be inculcating and communicating. They need to practice. And then one of the most, I'm sure all of the participants and panelists will agree, is the factor of accountability. Once we have the compliance, the culture, one of the critical aspects is accountability. People should be held accountable, and they should know that there is a red line for anyone, irrespective of the level, stature, and that's develops over the culture. That while we implement the people to get things in a very normal operational way, they definitely should know that there are boundaries set in, and that boundaries is not varying for the level or stature of employee. That is not permitted for anyone. And that's where you come in with the comments that one of the participant, Naveed, I think, Naveed Saeed has mentioned, walk the talk. You need to implement it. You need to show it happening rather than just set the tones. I think we are moving into the more operational aspect, from developing a compliance program to maintaining it. And with that context, what would be the feedback from your side, Bakar, in terms of communication and training? How much that you see plays a role in implementing this culture? And what would your be difference in just getting training, and what would be an effective training and communication that you have experienced in the organization of SABIC?
Yeah, the training, the training, it is, it has an impact, but and also the communication, but it is not, the only method that you need to rely on. Explaining the policies and give them some scenarios. It can work with the trainings, online trainings, or having sessions within the session, like a group session for the departments. But what has more effective, that when I mentioned before, the compliance moment, the discussion, the individual within the organization, they don't have the enough knowledge. So this is where it's came to the compliance department role to give them the enough information and the knowledge to have a topic to discuss with their employees. To keep this one happen every let's say, for example, every month. First time, second time, then they will repeat the same topics, and then they don't have that much different messages to deliver to their to their team. So we need to have more information, more scenarios, small topics that they can discuss during their compliance moment. And it has a bigger impact than having normal emails. When you have like HR, they want to have communication email, cybersecurity, they send communication email. Also the compliance, it is too many emails that they don't focus on. The trainings, if you have so number of trainings, people, they will not focus on these trainings. But this small discussion, it has a bigger impact within the organization.
Good. Firoz, how would you say that when you have different functions and different organizations, when you take over a company or establish a company, from that, what would be the most important thing your management will tell you when they are establishing the same culture or wants to establish the same culture in a new entity? So what would your management be sharing with you, the key points that you have to take care when you go for an organization to implement a compliance program?
Sure. I guess the first thing we always do is work off the missions and visions and values that we've established. We use those as the guiding principles. From there, we work on each subsidiary's corporate governance manual. So the way the subsidiary communicates, let's say, with the holding company, and what is the expectations from the holding company. What we also try to enforce is audit committees, which are partially going to be membered by people from the subsidiary, officers, and then also from the holding company. Apart from that, we also hold group trainings, let's say, again, to as Bakr was saying, to transfer some of the knowledge or some of the expectations, some of the common scenarios, and always we have the holding company portfolio, let's say, team that acts through the boards and imbues the values of the holding company.
Perfect.
Can I just build on some of these points, because I think we're talking a lot about culture here, and I think some of the people obviously on KSA-based compliance roles, you yourself, you're in Dubai. I'm sure there's other people from Dubai on this call as well. I think you've always got important, especially from a compliance program perspective, one size does not fit all. Now, what I mean by that is you have a common compliance program, absolutely. But when it comes to execution locally on the ground, how it is implemented, how it needs to be educated, how it needs to be trained, needs to change region by region. So what may work in the Americas and Europe may not work in the Middle East and will not work in Asia. Even within the Middle East region, Dubai is not Saudi. So don't think what will work in Dubai will work in Saudi. You have to customize your program in terms of the implementation based on factors on the ground. Now, I used to have a global role working in an oil services company. And, when we did work in Africa, you had to do things differently in terms of how you would educate, how you communicate people, how you would communicate to people in the US. People are very different, and people need to understand that truly for a compliance program to be effective, it's for compliance practitioners to understand how you can make that program relevant to the audience on the ground itself. The challenge, again, going back to, you're talking about communication training, one of the things that's always an expectation of compliance professionals is to do lots of training, and it needs to be in-person training, because that tends to be what Department of Justice tends to look at. How many times did you go to the site? How many live training sessions did you do, and all of those kind of things. With COVID-19, that's now going to change, right? Those sessions are not going to happen. So if we are going to do training, or if those training sessions are going to be by standard old-fashioned LMS systems, well, that now needs to change. How do we now change that in the era of COVID, in the era where people may not be in the office, people may be working remotely? How are as organizations going to engage with those people? Like Becker said, emails may not be as effective going forward. Online training courses in the traditional sense may not work. People want more interactive things. So how can we use the gamification of training courses? How can we use the accessibility of mobile phones more to get the communication training across? These are some of the things in terms of, from a culture change, we've got to think about in terms of how effectively are we going to engage with our employees going forward.
Couldn't agree more, Jalil, and to a certain extent, I would deviate with the thing that customization, indeed customization and standardization, that goes hand in hand when you implement compliance, because there are certain things which are driven through legislations, and for that the legislations have to be considered in mind for any organization which is operating globally. And when you have the localization, indeed, as one of our participant has very rightly pointed out, that every region has a mindset. So the Middle East mindset, and you already pointed out what Dubai would have, Saudi wouldn't have that different. So there is a mix of customization and standardization with the compliance program that is more robust and sustainable. And that brings me to a very effective or relevant question that Naveed Saeed is asking, and this is open to all our valued panelists, that who owns the compliance program in the organization? In your opinion, who is basically the person taking the ownership of the compliance program? Who? And that's and I think the person is basically referring to a specific function or role. So what do you think, Jalil? And then I'll move to Bakr, that what he thinks. So from your point of view, who owns the compliance program?
So in short, who owns it will be management. Because I say compliance is a risk for the business and it's a risk of doing business. So the management own it. Because I think, if I can just elaborate further as well, because I think most organizations will say, well, we have a compliance and ethics program, they own compliance. And I think if that's what a company says, then that's the wrong answer. Then you're bound to fail. It needs to be integrated into the DNA of the organization as part of an operational process. So it needs to be owned by the business. That would be my answer.
Bakr, your input, and then I'll give my end, but you first.
Yeah. I cannot say that more than what Jalil said. It's the risk owner is the management, the leaders of the organization. If a violation occur in anywhere, no one will go to the compliance team or the legal team and question them why this has happened. So it's need to be owned by the management themselves.
Fivos, your input.
Absolutely, I agree with Bakr as a legal consultant. It is basically the investment teams, the management. We provide guidance, we provide solutions, and I guess through communication, we also try to make sure that whenever in doubt, they come to us first. Before they terminate contracts, before they sign engagements, whatever. They come and check with us first. Let us review the documents. Let us review the situations, and accordingly try to find compliant solutions, I guess. And we always have open door communication in case somebody wants to tell us something in private.
Indeed. I think the management is definitely there, but there's a slight difference when I look into my organization, and that is that we consider the board of directors to be responsible in conjunction with the management. And that's why when we looked into, we have special clauses of compliance for the board. So there are board of directors, which is basically majority owned from the parent company, and they are minority also. We take the minorities also on board, that as an organization, it's not just one part of the stakeholders driving it. it is the complete board of directors entwined with the management that takes the responsibility. So I fully agree that the management is basically the custodian, but this custodianship should be supported well or overwhelmingly supported by the stakeholders representatives, so that the directors or the governance board is on support of this compliance. It has to be, as you very rightly pointed out, Jalil, that if the target setting of profitability in these times are not aligned with the culture of integrity, and the stakeholders requirement pushes to the management doesn't get this support, then the whole culture will collapse if the stakeholders and the management are not aligned on implementing a culture of integrity. So indeed, I think quite aligned on that with all of the panelists.
And there's just a question in the comment box, I think by Dr. Abdul Qadir, where he turns to, he believes that the indigenous ethics need to be cemented into corporations. And I think that's an interesting concept, and it's a deep concept, because again, it goes back down to the conversation of the basic in terms of what is ethics and who defines ethics. Because like I said earlier, ethical principles are different for all of us, and we all have a different set of a moral and ethical compass. So, who is to define that for a corporation? So yeah, you have, that's a valid point, Dr. Abdul Qadir, but you have to think of it in a global context. Like we say, everyone moral compasses are different. So who is that one person that will set that for the corporation? And that's really is where the challenge lies.
Yeah, and there definitely, when you go into the details of it, there are distinctions between ethics and compliance. There are definitely, ethics is primarily your own compass. Compliance is basically seen into the external compass, and ethics is beyond what the law is saying. It is basically your inner voice, what is right and wrong. But it goes into a philosophical discussion of what is right and wrong, and then it gets into the ethics values of individual. But indeed, I would say that yes, ethics is something, from my perspective, one step beyond of the topic of the general compliance that we talked about. It is more of the excellence in the compliance, that people set their own compasses, and that's where the culture drives the integrity rather than the compliance program drives the integrity. I would like to have the last poll also put in so that we can see the COVID's impact on management risk in organization. How do they see that? And that also brings me to the last question, that how do you see that, Jalil, you have already touched upon, but definitely would like to have a few more words on that. How do you see the COVID shaping up the corporate culture from your perspective? You definitely touch upon the training, but how to see what can be, or what we will be seeing changed on the corporate integrity culture due to this COVID situation and new risks emerging?
Like I said, I think, like I've touched on this in terms of what it means from a compliance program perspective, but, from a business perspective, the world has changed for all of us, and will continue to change. It's going to evolve very, very quickly. The challenge is always going to be is how we as compliance practitioners evolve with the business. And that is going to really depend on how embedded you are and how much of a partner you are with the business to be as part of that transformational change. What worked in the past is not going to work in the future, and we need to understand that. And remote working is going to be the norm going forward, and that itself poses challenges for employees, for the company, for compliance, just from a data security perspective, data privacy perspective. All of these kind of things are going to be new challenges for us as an organization. If you think to yourself, Naveed, your organization, your geographical footprint was huge before COVID, where you physically have offices. That's just now grown tenfold now because you have people now working at home, and that's a bigger footprint. Now, how do you manage that from an organizational standpoint? So really, I think, for compliance, I would say the challenges and opportunities that work both hand in hand is really to partner with the business team, have a seat at the table, be part of these discussions in terms of how the business is going to be evolved, and proactively manage that risk in terms of being part of the decision making, so you can proactively manage these issues before they become true issues going forward.
Perfect. Your input, Bakar, and I have a question also. If I can take the question first, sorry, but I think the panelist Mohammed Al Shaibi has asked that what is the best tool that can be utilized to measure improvement of compliance culture. So, Bakar, you can help us out on this question. What do you see the tool that can be utilized to measure the improvement of compliance culture? What would be? How do you gauge that improvement is coming in compliance?
The tool you need to have, you need first to, to have, you have to have the, the setup, the policies, the guidelines, the training material for your people. A reporting tool, it's also important that to make sure that people, they can report to, to compliance or to the legal department, with the confidence, if he didn't want to expose his name. Also, you need to, to make sure that there will not be any retaliation to the employees, so that they make sure they can, talk about, if they have like a violation or something they want to, or a concern they want to report, they are confident to deliver this message. This is the main. Other, it's like, to have, your internal control, you have your systems, that the governance, that it should be very clear and very solid.
Perfect. So, viewers, if you can quickly give one less than a minute input on that, how do you see the tool that can be used for a measurement of compliance program? Very quickly, because we have 3 minutes left, I have to wrap it up.
So just working off Bakar a little bit. One of our subsidiaries has used a third-party technology as part of its whistleblowing or reporting system, so that you don't even communicate directly with the company, you communicate with a third party, which then analyzes the information, passes it on. I think that's number one, a very good way to monitor breaches of your compliance. Apart from that, I think again, you have your compliance audits, sporadic ones, random ones. You can always get feedback from your management. If you have ambassadors of compliance, which sometimes we have in various departments, they also provide their feedback. It's not always going to be, yeah.
Perfect. So feedback is one of the things. Just we also have employee engagement surveys and feedback that give us a overall implementation and feedback on how the effectivity is. Thank you all the panelists, lively discussion. I'm really grateful for the participants' comments, questions also. It was a pleasure to moderate this. And one last comment, I really look forward that the organization like SABIC, STC, Siemens, and many others partner with organizations like Pearl Initiative that develops a very good environment in the market. So I look forward for this collaboration to continue. Over to you, Rania. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Naveed, and thank you really to Jalil, Fivos, and Bakar for your time and your expertise. We really hope that you enjoyed the discussion. I know we couldn't get to all of the answers from the audience, but as Naveed mentioned, please do reach out to us at the Pearl Initiative through our website, email, our social media channels, if you would like to have additional webinars and more information on our anti-corruption and best practices program, trainings, workshops, and our convenings. And we encourage you to check our other webinars across other governance-related matters, including diversity and inclusion strategies, how to implement it, and what does it mean beyond the gender lens, as well as other programs, corporate governance for MSMEs. We want to thank everyone again, our panelists and our audience for the engagement, and we wish everyone a wonderful afternoon. Please stay safe and healthy.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank
you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.